Okay guys, let's talk about what happens when you accept a placement. So you get a call, you can ask all the questions you want. They will tell you everything they know about the children, their ages, their history, any health concerns, things like that. Then if you decide to accept placement, they may have to go back and confirm. And I've seen from other foster parents that a lot of times you'll say, yes, I'll accept the placement, and by the time that worker gets back with the people in charge, then the children have already been placed somewhere else. So that may happen. So prepare your heart. If you say yes, you still may not get those children. You bring them home. You have to have obviously the right car seats if they're young, to put them in your car. You bring them home. They may or may not come with clothes, so you want to have all the clothing on hand that you'll need, or you want to have at least something to put them in, and then make a quick trip out to the store and get some more clothing or get their favorite food or whatever, depending on their age. And then I believe it's within the first 30 days you have to get them into the doctor. So depending on the case, you might have to take them to their doctor or take them to your own doctor. There'll be forms that you need to have filled out by the doctor that you get back to the social worker. The parents have the legal right to attend all of the doctor and dentist visits and things like that. And so you have to work that out with the social worker, whether the parent is coming and whether you feel comfortable being with the parent, or whether the social worker needs to be there as like a mediator between you two. They have to be seen by the doctor in any case. And then as long as the case is going to allow for family visits, those will start. I think ours started about 10 days after the boys came. Family visits started. So visits with the family, as far as I know, if they're little, I'm not sure if the cutoff is age 3, then the family visits are twice a week and they're for an hour and a half each time. If they're a little bit older, they can get away with once a week for 3 hours. So it's just to encourage them to keep that relationship with the parents, help them bond as much as we can, to try to interact with the parents as well, communicate important things to them, build a relationship with them, let them know that we support them. Going into foster care, you have to know that the goal is reunification with the parents, so you will be expected to work with the parents as well as they allow. There will also be probably family team meetings. In our case, those were usually done with me over the phone, like a teleconference. I would just be able to listen into the meeting. It was usually all of the workers involved, all of the foster parents involved, the biological parents, and any of their counselors or representatives would all be meeting, some in the room, some on the phone, and we would just go over all the things that we all need to know, like what are the goals for these children, what are the immediate needs, like was this child on any medication, do we need to get it refilled, did they leave their glasses in the birth parents' home and now we need to find them or get them new glasses, things like that. And then there's usually some talk about the parents' treatment plan and where they're at in the process and how they're doing. So I would encourage you as much as you can to get in on those meetings if you have the chance, because the social worker is not allowed to tell you those details about the parents or about the case, but you can hear them in the meeting. The same way that the social worker isn't really allowed to tell you like the siblings' names and things like that, but if you hear the siblings being discussed in the meeting, obviously you'll know something about them. This is going to be the same way with court dates. When court dates will start, there probably will be like an initial hearing, and then every 3 months there will be a hearing. I don't know if they call it a hearing, I think so. Anyways, there will be a court date probably initially, and then every 3 months, and this will go over the parents' legal matters, their health, whatever it is that's affecting their ability to have the children in their care. And you can kind of get a taste for where the case is heading and what the judge is going to do next. So I would strongly encourage you to go to those if you can. It is worth it, even if you have to get a babysitter, so that you can be completely in the loop about what is happening, because the workers are only allowed to tell you so much. Another thing to consider when you have placements is if the children get hurt, you need to photograph that and you need to type out exactly what happened or write it down. And in our case, because our social worker texted so readily, I would snap her a picture and I would text her, this just happened an hour ago, he hit his head on this. So I had a record of what happened. I was really paranoid about that because in our case, the birth parents were accusing me of things that I obviously wasn't doing, but it was still really nerve-wracking. And so definitely from day one, I would encourage you, if the child gets hurt in your care, document exactly what happened, take a photograph if appropriate, and then let the social worker know so she can make note of it. Because if the children show up at the visit and mom finds, a bruise on his arm, she gets to make up her own story and get it to the social worker before you. So there were times when I did forget about something that had happened, and I would have to say, oh shoot, yes, he did do that, I forgot to tell you. But I always felt better about it when I could tell them first. So consider that. And also start making notes of everything to do with the children pretty much. You want to have it all in one place. What I did is I had it in my planner and I would highlight it so that when we would go to court, if the lawyer would ask me any questions, I would have it right there. Yes, on this date, mom said this to me. On this date, she said this. Or mainly you want to document with little kids their behaviors. I started to notice things about our kids that they were doing after the visits. And so I would document those. And then when the worker asks how the kids are doing after visits, I have it right there. I don't have to try to remember. And then she can take that to the judge and let the judge know how they're being affected, because it's the judge's ultimate responsibility to do what's best for these kids. And so if she's trying to decide whether they need to go home or not, if they're doing very poorly after a visit, it's different than if they're very excited to see their mom and they're talking about it and glowing afterwards. So make notes, lots and lots of notes. Okay, and then going on to just some general questions about foster care that we get a lot. Discipline. As far as we have been told, we are only allowed to do timeout with foster children. That is all that they really allow, is timeout. And so there's a very fine line there between what you're allowed to do for redirection and what you're allowed to do for punishment. Because at one point we had asked, during one of our reports, we had been asked, what do we do for our own child when he gets in trouble? And one of the things I said was, we have him jump on the trampoline, 50 jumps on the mini trampoline. And she said, just letting you know, don't say that for the foster children, because you're not allowed to use physical activity as a punishment for foster children. And we thought, okay. And then later we were doing some foster care training, and one of the things that they offered as an idea was to have the child do physical exercise. So I took that to the licensing worker and said, why is it telling me this if we're not allowed to do it? And she said, you can do it as a redirection, like, oh, let's go run around the block. But you can't do it as like, oh, you talked back, you have to jump 50 times now. So it's a pretty fine line, but pretty much timeout is what you're allowed to do. As far as any kind of corporal punishment, spanking, anything like that, absolutely not with foster children. There is another gray area there when it comes to your own children. They told us in our training that technically the state cannot tell you how to discipline your own children unless it's getting into outright abuse. But as far as spanking, they said technically the state can't tell you you can't spank your own kids, but it is frowned upon, and logistically you're going to have a really hard time if you're spanking your kids and you're not spanking your foster kids. The kids are going to figure that out and it's going to be a mess. And so in our case, even though we personally believe in spanking and we have done spanking before with our children, we have tried not to spank even our own children while we've been foster parents. And that's just a personal choice. I don't need your opinion on it. I'm just letting you know what we have done. Now, we have friends who have been upfront with their social worker from the beginning that their own children are going to get a spanking once in a while, and social workers have accepted that. What we have struggled with is our social worker, and I believe it'd be the same for all of them, when you have a foster child in your home, a current placement, the social worker comes once a month and she talks to all the kids and she asks them what happens when you get in trouble. And so the way we see it is if our child says, oh, I get a spanking, that goes in her report and that gets sent all over the place, and we just felt like that could only be bad. And so we've chosen to try to get creative with timeout and things like that. So that would be up to you. You want to talk to your agency, and maybe you're someone who feels strongly about it and you could tell them, I'm not going to change, and see what they say. Or maybe the idea of spanking you think is terrible and you just don't have to worry about it. So I'm just telling you what we know. Traveling with foster children, the rule that we were told is you're not allowed to take them out of the state without written permission from the parent. So we were talking about going down to Ohio to the water park and the zoo, and we wouldn't have been able to take those boys unless their mom signed off on it. And sometimes the judge can override that, so if the parents are just being unreasonable, they might get an order from the judge to allow it, but in general you have to get their permission. If they said no, you either have to find a sitter or you have to ask for respite care for the child to go to while you're away. Okay, haircuts are the other thing. A lot of people don't realize the biological parents have all of the rights until rights are officially terminated, if that happens. So you cannot give them a haircut without their parents' permission, and you're supposed to try to cut it in a way that is what the parent would want. In our case, that got a little bit ridiculous, and we ended up saying fine. During the visit time, the social worker and the mom would take the kids to get their hair cut. And then in our case, our kids were exposed to head lice at a visit, and mom still declined our right to cut their very, very long hair. And so we went to the guardian ad litem, who is the lawyer that represents the best interest of the kids. And she went to the judge, and the judge gave us an order that allowed us to cut their hair. And that can get very strange. They're also allowed, the biological parents, as they should be, because they do have the legal rights still, they're allowed to do things like trim the children's fingernails. Any medical decisions, the parents get to make them unless a judge steps in and says otherwise. So just be prepared for that. You cannot go around doing things like that to the child, cutting their hair, cutting their nails, anything like that without permission from the parents. So, okay, which kind of leads me into the very last thing I want to talk about, something we get asked a lot. Everybody says, I want to be a foster parent, but I would get too attached. I couldn't handle the thought of them leaving. Okay, I am not a cold-hearted person. I'm a loving mom, just like you guys. And I just want to tell you that that was not a problem for me. And I know I'm not alone, because when it wasn't a problem for me, I went running to my friends who had fostered and said, am I a terrible person? Why am I not, devastated at the thought of them leaving? And they reassured me that that's actually normal. Bringing home a child from foster care is not the same as bringing home a baby from the hospital that you're going to have forever. I remember very clearly standing in my kitchen with the lawyer that represents the boys and saying something to her about, oh, so we should be in the clear now, like someone's not going to show up at my door and just take them tomorrow, right? Because the judge decided they're going to stay in foster care for a while. And she looked at me and she said, honey, it's foster care. They could show up at your door in 5 minutes and take them anytime. And that really stuck with me. Like, it is very hard to open up your heart and let yourself go deeply and madly in love with these kids when they're reminding you constantly that they're not your kids. They could leave any minute. And like I just said, you have no rights to make any decisions for them. You get to decide what you offer them for supper, and that's really about it. The parents do still have all of the rights. Your job as a foster parent is to keep them safe, is to keep them healthy as well as you can, and do what you can do to help them have a good life while they're in your care. And so I don't say any of that to be negative or to complain, but I just want to let you know that if you're concerned about your heart, I'm not saying your heart couldn't get broken. It very easily could have, and I haven't been through it where they left. Like in our case, we ended up adopting, so maybe it will be harder for me next time if we get a placement that leaves. But I would say I was more the opposite, where I was more worried that should I be more attached? Should I be more scared of them leaving? Because honestly, I wasn't at that time. It was just really hard to bond. And for us, every time we went to a court date and it started to look more and more like they might stay, or even just not even thinking of them staying, but even just going to the court date and hearing more and more about their circumstances, it just broke my heart for them. And I did start to feel like, oh my gosh, like I'm one of very few people in this world who are looking out for these little children who are helpless to help themselves. And so it was a very gradual process for me, and I know I'm not the only one who feels that way. So to answer your question, did I worry about that? I guess not so much.
Hi guys, I'm just popping in here real quick. I obviously didn't film this part on the same day, but while I was editing, I thought of one more question that we've been asked a lot lately, and I want to make sure to answer it here. So that is about babysitters. Are you allowed to get a babysitter for your foster child, or does that child pretty much have to stay with you every day, all day long, and go with you wherever you go? Fortunately, you can get babysitters, and it's actually easier than you might think. There is a form you fill out. You can list like 6 people, I think, initially, and then anytime you want to add more people, it's very easy and quick to do. You fill out this form. They do need a social security number so that they can background check each person. So what we usually did is have that person call the agency directly and give the number over the phone, so there was no form with the number and no text or email or anything like that with someone else's social security number in it. But if they give that information to the agency runs a quick background check on them. There is no cost to you, no cost to the person who wants to be your babysitter, nothing like that. Nothing has to be signed or mailed or anything, so you can literally find a new sitter one day and have her approved to babysit the next day. It was really fast, and our licensing worker was so great, we were able to just text her and give her a heads up that someone new would be calling her, and she would handle it right away. This is also a great thing to think about if you have just told your friends and family that you're going to be fostering and they're all excited and they want to help you. We put that out there as a, hey, one way you could really help us is to be approved to watch these kids in case we need your help. Because you cannot just leave them with your neighbor or whoever at the last minute if something comes up. So it's a good idea to have a lot of people on that approved list. I don't know how it works with licensed daycares. I would imagine that you would just have to have the person that's going to be there the most, or 1 or 2 people that are typically taking care of the child, have them approved to watch the child. As far as nurseries, like at church and at MOPS and things like that, we were told that as long as we were in the building, it was fine to leave that child in the nursery with other people. So you don't have to worry that like every person on your nursery rotation at church has to be approved. However, if there were special events where our church had childcare and we were leaving the building, we did have to reach out to a person in charge there and have them get the background check done. So I hope that that helps. And also think about your visits. If the children need family visits once or twice a week, that was when I usually did my grocery shopping, because then I only had my biological children with me. I didn't have the other children at that time. So it's kind of like free childcare in a sense, or if you don't have other children, that's like 1 to 2 hours that you have where you could just go to a coffee shop and get your work done, take your laptop, do whatever you need to do while you're in town.
Okay, if you guys have other questions, please let me know. You can tell me in the comments and I will get back with you, or you can private message me if you want to ask something that you don't want out there publicly. Thank you for watching, and we would really love to help you if you're considering foster care. We'll do whatever we can to encourage you. Oh, and you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube as Married to the Farm. So be sure to follow for more foster care updates and things like that.